Next, please welcome to the stage Kara Swisher, journalist and host of On with Kara Swisher, for a conversation with Paolo Benanti, professor at Gregorian University, Yonah Schiller, founder of Common Era, and Mona Hamdy, managing director of Anomaly.
Thank you. I'm so excited to talk about this topic. I'm not a particularly religious person, so that makes it even better. Thank you so much. This is a cool event and in areas that I talk about a lot, but at this time we're going a little bit away from secular. And so we're also going to be taping this for my podcast On with Kara Swisher, so it will be on. So be enthusiastic if you want to be. If not, you don't. No problem. All right. It's great to chat with you it's great to chat with you at Shared Futures, the AI Forum hosted by Aspen Digital and the Patrick J. McGovern Foundation. Thank you for doing this. So there's a lot to talk about. We have about 40 minutes, and I want to get to each of you, and please jump in as you feel. Let's start by laying out the table stakes. Do you use AI? Now, each of you. If yes, what for? If not, how come? And we'll start with Father Paolo, then Mona, and then Rabbi Schiller.
Well, my background is engineer, so yes, I use AI, and I use for multiple things. As an academician, to skim among papers, you have to read tons of papers, and you can get some kind of intuition on which one deserves to be written before the other. Then I cannot forget that I was an engineer, and vibe coding is wonderful, especially if you live in an intentional community like the Friar. Mm-hmm. And we have a lot of.
So you're all vibe coding over
there. Yeah.
Super vibe coding.
We have a lot of expense. So
okay.
Produce some good app that you can put on an app store and making money for the monastery. Okay. Wonderful.
Such as?
Yeah, such as, for example, we make a lot of booklet, mm-hmm. and to impose the page on a booklet, you have to have expensive software, a wonderful vibe coding app, but I don't want to say the name, it's conflict of interest.
Okay, all right, okay. Mona?
So I use AI. Yes, I'm an academic. I do the same thing. I also work across a lot of cultures, so using it for localization is really important, automation. I am a statistician, and I do a lot of financial modeling, so I hang out with the vibe coders. AI is very useful to be able to speak to them. And I'm a mom, so figuring out what to do with the one tomato and the random cheese in my refrigerator is really useful for AI too.
The refrigerator leftovers.
The refrigerator leftover AI gets me every time.
Mm-hmm. Can you explain what vibe coding is for people? Do people know what that is, I assume, presumably?
Well, should I?
Oh, do it.
Okay. There are some software that simply allow you to transform a natural language request in a code with different model. And the problem is that you have to, theoretically, you should have some kind of coding ability to understand if the code that is produced by the model is something that works or is something that hides bugs or other features. But you can write tons of lines of code with one natural language sentences that make things faster until the software don't reach a certain level of complexity, and then you broke the model.
Broke the model, but eventually you'll ask for what you want. That's the idea, is that anybody will be able to code just by asking. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, we run an R&D platform called Common Era, and as part of that platform, we have a number of different projects. And so some projects use AI just like other people use AI for efficiencies and create access and just operational. But we're also talking to people at MIT about an AI rabbi and thinking about the contours of whether that's a terrible idea or whether that's a good idea. And yeah, I planned a vacation using AI, very effective.
Where?
It was a vacation that we chose not to take to Iceland.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right, so you didn't know if it was made up places.
Exactly.
Which is fine. So in general, right now there's essentially three kinds of people. There's doomers, end of humanity. Boomers, which is best thing ever. nothing but straight up and to the right. And then something Reid Hoffman calls zoomers, which are just regular, like understand that it's a tool, could be a weapon, etc. I'd love you each to talk about whether you feel like AI will be a net positive or net negative. And now I'm talking about net for humanity. I'll start with Mona and then Rabbi Schiller and then Father Paolo. But I will point out 2 stories in the New York Times today. One was about a chatbot, a ChatGPT chatbot that started interacting with a guy and drove him crazy, eventually, existentially crazy, and we'll get into that idea. Lost his entire feeling that he existed on the planet, that this was a simulation. Right. For those who don't know, a lot of people in tech think we live right now, and it feels like a fucking simulation right now, actually. But we live in a simulation, so they question their very existence in this story. It was a really depressing story. Yeah. Essentially, conspiracy theories on steroids. This is what we'll bring to it. The other one was a very delightful story about Starbucks baristas who now don't have to look at that dumb manual anymore, which it allowed them to make drinks in a much better way by inputting what people wanted. And totally useful. I could see it happening. So Mona, talk from your perspective.
So I think it's a factor of time here. If we're talking about, and first of all, with respect to that article that came out today and those communities, that is a very real thing. In the United States, in Georgia, you just had legislation passed by families of victims of social media and of that sort of very introspective.
Especially children.
Especially children. And I've had the privilege of working with some of those families as a tech ethicist. And I think that that's a very clear signal that that there are nefarious and that there are malicious and that there are negative outcomes from a use or from this technology. And I think it becomes a factor of time, Kara. We're talking now about large language models. Are we talking about net AI, net positive overall when we look at a future of AGI? And will we get there from language models? Net positive, yes. Will we get there from where we are? Have we seen alignment? Probably not. Is it dangerous? Clearly. And that, to me, if there's one human in the balance, it's worth us taking a look at that there. So I don't know, is that a middle? Is that a qualified
middle. Yeah,
boomer,
absolutely.
zoomer? Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, I think I would put myself as a zoomer boomer, although I never have associated myself with the boomers. But I feel like, in my line of work, in innovation and creativity, you have to be optimistic. And so there is a sense that there is a lot of possibility. And I think that's something that needs to be looked at. At the same time, it's obviously fraught and problematic, and it's something that we're going to have to look at really carefully and proceed down that road, with a lot of caution. But at the same time, I don't know if religion is ripe for disruption, but it does need to evolve, and the world is changing. And so I don't think we can take an off-ramp, and we're going to have to contend with that. That's part of the evolution of just society, and I think religion has to keep up.
Although we do have some history here with the current internet, which I don't think is bathing itself in a lot of glory so far, except for certain people.
Well, I belong to an association with a lot of boomer, actually, but this is another thing. Because
Deep boomer.
I don't.
Also,
I
the
cannot
greatest
say
generation.
What
Congress.
That's
sorry.
Well, but I'm an academician. That means someone that can make complex also the easy things. 60,000 years ago, when for the first time a member of our species taking his hand a clapstick, was it a weapon or a tool? So actually I think that this question belongs to any kind of technology.
Sure.
And now the technology that we are looking is a technology special because it's touching the world. And we invented language as a technology to do something that other species can't. When I say to a member of my species, I'm sad, I'm allowing another member of my species to see something that is invisible, that is in me. So language is the technology that allows the imagination of other beings to be instructed by myself. It's the ability to have an invention. When we change this technology, we change the world. In the Renaissance, we invented the printed press, and we changed the world. We open up to the modernity. Now we have the computed language, and we see the effect. But when we have a machine that simply speaks, that simply is able to produce a narrative on reality, we are touching what we can define our operating system. So the machine can hack what we believe, what we feel, what we can imagine. And this makes this technology really, really sharp. So it's not just a club stick, it's like a nuclear weapon.
Right.
And this is why it's not a matter of the technology in itself, but the impact of technology in society.
Right.
And this is where the different stakeholders are needed to be part of this discussion, because we could have victim or we could have winner, with few winner that takes all.
Right, and especially right now, since most of the development is private, which is why the new Pope is talking about it quite a bit, which must be great for you from a career point of view. But let me note that when the printing press was invented, I did a great interview with Yuval Harari, who wrote a recent book, who has sort of turned dark on technology. His first books were beloved by technology people. Now they're like, wait, he doesn't like us. And I'm like, he doesn't like you, neither do I. But one of the points he makes was when the press was invented, everyone thinks it was the age of great illumination. And the first book was not that. It wasn't religious. It wasn't the Bible. It wasn't all the different Newton and everyone else. It was actually a book called The Hammer of Witches,
That's right.
which was about how to kill women, really. And hundreds of thousands of women died, and it was a bestseller. That was the bestseller of the era, including this guy who did it, seemed like he was bipolar or something, but he thought he was a religious person. And ended up they never had witch hunts before this, and the religious authorities never got involved until this book got out, which was the result of this weapon, right? But which of course then led to great illumination, which is interesting. And in one case, in this book, this guy made up, he envisioned women had these trees which had nests full of penises that they stole from the men of the village. It was in this book. It's great reading. But this kind of stuff permeated in that way. So I'd love to get to the idea of religion, because also Rabbi Schiller, the story of the Tower of Babel from the book of Genesis, and the Jewish folk tale of Rabbi Lowe and Gollum are often cited as potential warnings about the pitfalls of technology. They're right there. Those are technological stories. Can you walk everyone through these stories? Because I don't think people see them as that. You mentioned, everything is a technology. Talk a little bit about that, and if you see them as useful frameworks, understanding AI.
Yeah, I mean, the Tower of Babel was, a time when people were trying to form some sort of community. There was an idea that there could be one tower in which everybody would come unified, and then it was destruction of the tower, and then everybody were diffracted into various languages, and created a great sense of polarization. The Gollum story is an idea that through mysticism and Jewish magic, you could create an entity that would be made of material that would be not human, but it would do the will of the community. And it was set up in such a way to protect the community. So these are some of the examples that are usually cited in thinking about what it might be to have an independently thinking machine, and driven to wondering what the connection is between how do we enact that today and where do we see the technology going today. I think they're helpful examples, but I think I think they're helpful examples. I think we need to still proceed and think about how to apply in that technology or those ways of things happening in the world with a certain consciousness. I think in the end, for me, the most important part is it's also calling upon our own humanity and asking ourselves, we can't really go down that road unless we ask ourselves, who are we? And if we don't have a firm grounding in who we are as a humanity, as a people, individually, collectively, then it's going to be a weapon. It's going to be nuclear. And I think one of the things that I find that interesting about this moment and these conversations is that people are talking about humanity in ways that I've never heard of in my life. People are talking about humanity. What does humanity mean? What does it mean to be human? What does it mean to be in community?
Sure, it's often, though, recently accompanied by is doomed.
Yeah, it's true, but the question itself, even asking the question existentially, we can't really engage with this, or the way we're engaging this threatens our. And the idea of humanity becoming a centered conversation, I think is really interesting, and I think novel.
Novel, okay.
Yeah.
Father Paolo, one of the things that tech leaders often refer to AGI and AI in general is godlike. Now, they had these godlike ideas before, and they're a little narcissistic in my experience. And how do you look at something, creating something greater than humanity? They use the word God quite a bit, and recently a lot, to me, because these AI companies are racing to get artificial general intelligence. Again, this is AI that's smarter and more capable than humans. The money is enormous. Meta is reportedly going to invest $15 billion in scale AI in an attempt to catch up, but it's 15, 20, 60 billion everywhere. Talk a little bit of this idea of creating a godlike figure that's made of a machine. It's not a new idea, but it's certainly moving that way. And I have a theory, largely because a lot of the people who create this are men, that it's also about birth. They can't have children. They can't actually make a child. So they want to make one, kind of thing. Think about it.
Well, I'm thinking which kind of connector will be united to which one, but that's another thing.
Father.
Well, it's interesting that we are using for marketing a religious word. That is really interesting. Mm-hmm. But what I think is much more compelling on us as a humanity is that such kind of machine will change a way that from modernity we use to say what is believable from what is not believable, Mm-hmm. Every one of us believe on something, because as a human beings we cannot experience everything. So I pass a lot of time when I was in the elementary school coloring mushroom red with white dot. Mm-hmm. That someone convinced me that it's better to not eat them. Mm-hmm. So I don't have such experience, but I believe to a trustable source. Mm-hmm. Well, in the modernity, we start to shape trustable source in an architectural way, a scaffold in a library, where all the medicine information stay together, all the biology information stay together. So some one of us, when during the COVID was here something like drink vinaigrette and you don't get COVID, can say, okay, this does not belong to medicine, maybe to something else. And we know which one come from where. Now the machine throw out the answer, and AGI will do much more than that in a way that we can define oracular. And in this way, we are missing the coordinate to understand what is believable and what is not believable. In that
Can
sense,
we take a step right there, though, and just say that we are asking what's believable and not believable from something that is not even close to AGI. Like, let's just remember that the definition of GPT is probably closer to what you're talking about than even AI. Generative, pre-trained transformer. That is a very fancy sentence completion machine. And so what we're really saying is, can this generative pre-trained transformer be godlike? It is something created ostensibly by a very few, very Western, very shielded, very white, very male. I mean, theoretically, sure, maybe somebody else, but mostly that, creating something that we are calling godlike. And it is also where we are spending a lot of time alone in our bedrooms, on our cell phones, asking it to fill in very big gaps of our lives. And that is what we are calling godlike, for context, right?
Right.
So,
right, I was going to ask you about that.
so what's that?
There is always a girl, it's like the Smurfs, there's only one, but go ahead. Pay
well,
attention.
I think
Watch, listen.
if I have to react to that, I think that the problem is what we made with the reinforced learning. Mm-hmm. This is the key. Yeah. Because, there is an informatician in the 60s, Mikey was the name, and a colleague come to him and say, can you make a machine that can play tic-tac-toe, nuts and cross in English, British English, and win maybe? It say to the colleague, let me think. 1 year later, he come with 302 boxes of match. And on every matchbox, he put one configuration of the game, and inside there is a little bit, bottleneck, and he takes some random color, each color for one of the chess in the nuts and cross, and at the start of the game, the machine starts, you shake the box, and the color of the balls that come out is the movement of the machine. Then is the human beings, you go to the configuration, shaky, 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 you shake the ball. If the machine win the game, you put 3 other balls of that color in each box of the color that come out. If the machine tie, you put 1. If the machine lose, you subtract 1. After 20 games, the machine start to tie and win. After 150, there is no way to win with the machine. Welcome to reinforced learning. Right. Is it the color ball knowing that they are playing tic-tac-toe? No. Is it the matchbox knowing that they are playing tic-tac-toe? No. The same thing is with ChatGPT. When you prompt something, you can hear, theoretically, the matchbox that shaky, 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 and one token after one token, they put out something without the knowing of what they are putting out. Right. The problem is not in the machine. It's a huge matchbox system. It's in ourselves and in what we believe. Now, is this a religious problem? I don't know. But if a human being's problem, because we believe what we can eat and what we cannot eat, what we can do and what we cannot do from someone else of our species. Now we took a machine to do that.
Right. So tech leaders like Peter Thiel and Sam Altman think we're heading towards this transhumanist future, Mona. Yes. Some thinkers on the extreme end of that philosophy believe we'll be able to live forever. I'm actually doing an entire series about, my next book is about this, but I will be living forever, just FYI, once I try all these things. I'm not doing whatever Jeff Bezos did.
I was like, NAD, I don't know, you snort it now?
Yes, I am. I'm doing that. So either AGI will unlock advances in healthcare or expand our lifetimes, or it'll unlock a technology that lets us upload our consciousness to computers. Talk about, is that utopian ideal compatible with faith, or is it turning technology into the religion and usurping God's role in human life? If it has all the answers.
Right. So my mother died last year, and I have a background in social development, and so I consider myself very close to people at the very bottom of the rungs of humanity, where, you know, we in the West and we in Silicon Valley sort of forget about these people as kind of the collateral damage of development and evolution. And then my mom died, and I felt like it was almost condolences because it was a medical failure. You know, I'm sorry you weren't healthy enough or rich enough or whatever for your mom to live. And in a religious sense, or in a lifetime, in a human life cycle sense, we've been talking about this a lot, there's natural evolution to where you go as a human. And maybe we're at the time in society where this is the very first time where our species might think about compression of mortality and then ultimately to immortality. And that's a very real sentiment in this community that Kara's talking about. Most of the people there, I think, are really obsessed with this idea. 82% of the world has a religion or identifies with a religion, and about 96% from my research so far do not believe that they will live forever, and that they believe that there will be an eventual end to their life cycle. Where does that put us as humans in this age of immortality when our science is so extended? What does that do to your consciousness? And you know, the idea of an AI rabbi or an AI Mona living on forever, is it ultimately Mona? Now, from a religious sense, no soul, no body. No body, no mortality. No mortality, no infinity. And I think that that's something that's probably very hard to reconcile with this sort of techno-religion, this fervor of this godlike ability to be able to live forever. Does it make us more human to push against the confines of that? I don't know. Is it something that we are physically or spiritually or psychologically able to do? I don't believe so. And I would think that it would come back to where we are as a species. We've been saying repent for the end is nigh since we were able to record our history. And what does that mean for where we go collectively? We should stop and think about that, because fundamentally it does make us question
of whether it is.
So whether it is.
Rabbi Schiller, when you think about that idea, you know, an AI rabbi is one thing. I could see an AI rabbi. I could see an AI priest, et cetera. Those are answering questions. There's like probably there's probably 26 things.
I'm thinking about an army of rabbi vibe agents.
Right, okay, all right, okay. You can see that happening, but talk about that idea of because often when I talk with these guys, they talk about, and it was just actually in Mountainhead on HBO, putting themselves on the brain grid. They do talk about the brain grid. They talk about, I had an extent, when I was speaking to Elon Musk, no longer, he's changed. He talked a lot about meat, like that we are meat, you know, and that why are we talking through our meat flaps, which is what he called lips. It's from a sci-fi story. When this thing can be like God-like, and have all the answers
Yeah.
and anticipate everything. What does that mean in a religious sense?
Yeah.
How do you explain it? If you could live forever and load yourself up to a brain grid,
Yeah,
is there such
I
a thing
don't-
as religion?
I'm not, it's fun. What's going through my head are two things. One is that
You're meat.
I'm definitely meat, I
Made
think
of meat, that's
we're made of meat, and it's very fundamental to the way we think about humanity. That we're supposed to be in this world, and there's a part of it that's not connected to this world, and that is how we navigate the obscurity of this world by the combination of those two things, which are in conflict in many ways, and finding harmony is how we sort of get clarity. There's two things that pop through my mind when I think about this is that, first of all, there's a saying in Judaism where you're supposed to live ad mea esrim, until 120. So what's interesting is that the technology isn't there for us to live to 120, but it could surpass that. But the point is, it seems that there is a tradition of designating that you're actually supposed to die. It doesn't say live forever. And so that's interesting to me. I'm thinking about that. I'm also thinking about my brother who's a doctor who, he told me recently, he's like, we're all going to die of prostate cancer at some point. Meaning, like, we're all in a...
Well,
Not us. You're good. You're so good.
I hope so. Sign me up. Until 120 years, then I'm done. But I mean, there is a place of degradation that is just like, I think there's something human about that. Now, I don't know. The answer is I really don't know. And I think that one of the greatest questions that we're going to have to ask around all this stuff is what we have yet to really realize what's going to be. And I think we're going to be faced with a lot of really tough questions. I don't think we can answer them exactly from this moment because they're not really quite here yet.
So, Father Paolo,
Yeah.
when you think about that, because the whole story of Jesus is that idea of the man becoming a man and then being godlike. How do you think about it?
Actually, Jesus was the opposite. He
Yes,
was
I know
God
he was
and
a
began.
man and then he
Yeah.
began, right.
On the elementary stuff, I'm good.
Yeah.
Well,
I never paid attention to catechism. I am Catholic, sort of.
well, I'm trying to. The problem is that, what make of our thinking on reality a religious thinking? This is the first element. Something becomes a religious thinking when you look at the fragility of the human beings, at the problem of the human beings, and you start to say that there is a moment in which all these things will be solved, and we can to be saved. And usually the religion put this time after the history. Actually, we start to talk about history because there is an end of history. The paradise or what else? Well, at one point, there are some kind of thinking that are improper religious thinking. And they put the fixing of all the problem inside the history. One is Marxism. After the revolution will be no more problem. Well, some kind of thinking that you are talking about put the same thing inside the history with technology. Technology will fix everything. Now the problem is not about technology. It's about improper religious thinking that would like simple to fix the problem of humanity inside the history. And this is something that philosophically, let me do short, complex things. It's proven that cannot happen. So if there is history, there is not the end of problem. You have to live, you have to eat. We are meat, yes. And so you need to survive to such kind of things. And this is where there is a contradiction. If they are looking for fixing all the problem inside the history, they will fail. And we know that when we believe to such kind of things, we have horrible solution that we call communist with Lenin, we call Nazis, fascism, and things like that. And this is the dark side of this improper religion that can kill people in the name of the idea of being better for someone.
But Father, would you say, wouldn't you say that this accelerationist view is sort of a punt to the future, where we say, oh, it's okay, AGI is going to fix it, when you have a youth that probably feels more disenfranchised with political systems and their economic future than ever before? You have a climate that is ostensibly on fire. And completely disregarded, and a technology that just has a huge unnamed and maybe unquantified human cost. Aren't we kind of doing the same to the future too? We're like, don't worry, we're going to all be godlike in the future. Does the future fix that?
More than religious thinking, I think, is the effective altruism that has such kind of problem. But it's not a religious. It's a form of non-practical ethics. In the 1974, there was a wonderful book published in Oxford that simply point out why such kind of thinking is not working. Because this idea is the deep utilitarianism that say that you have to do what produces the maximum good. So imagine that you are in a boat in a lake in Germany, and you see a man that is drawing. Should you save him? Of course, the results is good. If it's Hitler, if it's the father of Hitler, if it's the grandfather of Hitler, so where you have to stop in counting the effect? So how many generations you have to sacrifice to have the perfect solution for humanity? This is the problem. It's not practically doable. It's not a religious thing.
Right.
It's something that does not work for the human capabilities to determine the effect of an action.
Okay, so the Rome Call, the moral framework for AI, started by the Vatican, assume you're informed, signed by representatives of all three Abrahamic religions, says that the inclusion and partiality of two of the core principles for the ethical adoption of AI. It says these systems must not discriminate against anyone, and that AI systems must not follow or create biases. I'd like to, when you think about that idea, it is completely, the whole thing, whatever, crap in, that's what is it, garbage in, garbage out, is what technology is all about, really, and what's in it. How worried are each of you about this, and how there's a couple of concerns I want to go through pretty quickly. This bias, each of you, the possibility of bias, if it's going to be impartial. It can't be impartial if it's made by people.
Yeah. I mean, for me, the greatest bias I'm concerned about is money. I think money's funny. As soon as the incentive is for engagement or for somebody making a buck, I think that's the bias I think is the most concerning. If there is, Judaism and Catholicism don't always agree, but I would much prefer to trust Paolo than Sam Altman. So that's okay.
Because you don't know me.
Exactly.
It's the outfit.
And so if there's people who are incentivized by doing good, if they create a manifesto that is generally contours that are putting stuff out there that is their intention, I can trust that intention. That doesn't worry me. And even though there's bias, there's religious bias, there's geopolitical bias, et cetera.
What about you, Mona?
Yeah, I think again, if you come down to where technology is, if we're talking about as sort of an aware, intelligent, and sentient AI that is completely able to be free of bias in a theoretical future world, maybe, not if but when, then less so. But currently, I think we're looking at a mashup of a neural net or an amalgamation of all human thought since the beginning of time, and I can't see it being anything but biased. For you or against you. And the more you use it for yourself, you become biased to your own egocentric view of the world, which I think is probably anathema to the idea of anything that religion might teach you about your context and the place of creation. So I think fundamentally, yes. And where are you with that alignment? If you were to be convicted of a capital crime and you're put on trial, and you have the chance to have an AI judge and an AI jury, would you choose an AI jury? Most people say no, because we have a sense that there's a human sense of mercy, of context, of understanding this physical and spiritual composition of what you are as a human. So therein is the double-edged sword of bias. I think until we get to AGI, bias is the name of the game.
And since
Well,
this is I assume you help
let me
organize.
stitch to a Jewish, if a Jewish stitch to a Catholic, like me. Daniel Kahneman. Daniel Kahneman, Nobel Prize, was used to translate the word bias with systematic preference.
Yes.
When we talk about AI, and AI is a statistical tools, we would like to have some kind of systematical preference. So if I have an autonomous car, I would like that the car has a systematic preference to stop with the red light. Now, the problem is that you cannot have an AI without such kind of systematic preference. The problem is when systematic preferences are hidden by someone behind a copyright or a secret recipe. So the ethical problem here is we cannot remove systematic preference from the machine. We are developing for that. But do we have a right to discuss, to in some way decide as a multiple stakeholder community where this systematic preference has to be put or where they are before we use it? This is the core question. There are some kind of biases that we can justice, giving more to the one that has less. Now, the problem is that if we ignore that a statistical tools has systematic preference, we can do something that, in my personal view, is absolutely the worst things that we can do. When we have an asylum seeker, now we don't allow him to talk with an officer because officer can have bias. We tell to him, give me your phone, and the algorithm will tell you if you deserve or not. Now we are telling to someone that has no rights from the country where he comes from, and he still has no right to the country where he's knocking to, that has to hide himself to get by, give me your phone. This is the naked man, nothing else. How we treat this naked man is what we believe that a man deserves or not.
That's right.
And this is the bias, when man became data.
Okay, when man became data. But there's also other issues, moral issues about jobs, obviously, whether it will replace jobs. Right now, since we have a conflict happening in real time, AI-guided drones. I'd love to understand, what do you think the most worrisome thing from a moral point that is inherently immoral? Obviously, some of the creators of it, Jeffrey Hinton, are worried about the moral issues. Yes. I suppose we could all agree that AI killer drones, probably we should have rules about it, I'm guessing, but maybe not. And so what of the many different, especially when there's malicious state actors using them or other actors, what from your perspective, we just have time for 2 more quick questions, very quickly, what would be the most worrisome part from a moral point of view for each of you? 1, 2, 3, very quickly.
I mean, there's a whole body of law in Judaism around war and how to conduct war, and it's very complex, and obviously, in today's world, it's only more complex. It would be applied to drones. I think there's technologies that are now kicking in that probably push the boundaries of precedents that are existing already in those ethical dilemmas and debates. And so I think each evolution of this technology is going to press and consider, how do we better refine and how do we apply those laws? I'm not an expert in Jewish law as it applies to warfare, but I would imagine it would fall under that rubric of law.
Mona?
So I'm very lucky to consider myself an Arab American Muslim woman, and I think that the biggest thing that I see, and this is in war or outside of war, is the responsibility upon which you take upon yourself when you are in a place where someone else's life is in your hands, whether that's physically and immediate or through your actions or remotely. So to your point about drones and legislation around what it means to take a life, what it means to preserve a life, and to make sure that everyone understands that everyone has the right to exist. And if our technology is truly revolutionary and very good, it will allow for all different kinds of people to exist. That's probably the greater innovation and the greater ability of technology, to allow all of us to coexist and to exist. And that's what we should be solving for. When we're solving against that, we've done this before. In the 90s with the Human Genome Project, we had ELSI frameworks, ethical, legal, and social implications frameworks, where we sat at the precipice of a technology we didn't understand about how it would interact with our bodies and our ability to preserve our lives. We came together as a world to say, this is what it should look like. The Geneva Convention of DNA and genes. We could do that again. We have to first recognize that all 8 billion of us count.
Okay.
Well, as an ethicist, I have to say that there are 2 criteria. One is the importance of the issues, and taking a life is really important. Another one is the urgency. Well, what AI can produce is a displacement of inequality that can produce the collapse of middle class. Yes. And if the middle class collapse, I think that Western civilization can collapse, because you have a so huge inequality that could be impossible to stay together. In the sense of the urgency, I think that AI is pinging on that, because the job displacement and inequality that could be injected can produce such kind of bad effect.
Okay. So last question. We talked about some of the challenges that come from incorporating AI into our world. There's an opportunity for faith leaders to help guide societies as we grapple, no matter what the faith and the transformations that it will bring. We have just a very short amount of time. Each of you, what's your vision of how religious authorities can help communities process, adapt to, find meaning? If it's a world with all the answers, religion's about not answering all the questions, presumably. So, Father Paolo, Mona, and then
well, you
Rabbi
quote
Schiller.
Rome Call for AI Ethics. Rome Call for AI Ethics is simple, raising the question, keep the question alive. We was able to put together 21 different religions of the world, including the 3 Abrahamic religions. And because the absolute majority of people on the face of the earth are believers, the absolute majority of religion was expressed by the Rome Call. And this idea that the absolute majority of living people on the earth can't stay together and say, no more in our identity, to have such kind of conflict or to use the technology to be divided, I think that that could be a service that religion can do on AI debate. Not giving the answer, keeping the question alive.
Mona?
I love that.
Yeah.
We have to get off.
Yes,
Yeah.
religion helps people find uncertainty navigable and helps them find meaning and purpose and from the daily and making the mundane sacred somehow. So I think that any technology that helps people carry that within them is a beneficial use of that technology.
Great answer.
Yeah, and I would just say that I think that inherently people are looking for spirituality and looking for ways of connecting with themselves. And if AI were to able to enhance that process, that would be really great. I think the key question for me is incentives and creating a system where the incentives are there, that the technology is going to follow the goal of what people actually need as opposed to what AI needs.
What AI needs. You don't have to answer this question. What do you think God thinks of AI?
Oh, you know, I'm simple a Francisca. You need a little cardinal to answer to that.
All right. I'll have to find a Jesuit. Anyway, thank you so much, and thank you, each of you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.